What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys have had a great week out there. Been an interesting week, from the GameStop drama to all the earnings that we've had of these top companies. It's been an eventful week, and I'm glad you're here on the channel to share it with me. I really appreciate it. So let's talk about Visa today. Visa just reported earnings after the bell today, ticker symbol V. Kind of a full disclosure, I do own shares of Visa, and I do really like Visa. I like Visa's business model, and I like how consistent it is. Although, as we've seen over the last year, the virus has impacted this business incredibly. So while they've seen strength in their debit and e-commerce volumes, international spending is just in the tank. And so when I get over to the revenues and kind of the breakdown in the numbers, we'll actually see that and see that if and when that comes back, Visa's pretty well positioned actually. So Visa over the last year actually has been pretty flat. The stock is down about 3% over the last year, but over the last 5 years, it's up 175%. So if we can get past the current situation that we're in with this health stuff, well, Visa's well positioned to kind of capture a lot of that growth that we've kind of seen go by the wayside over the last year. Now, from a valuation perspective, Visa, I wouldn't say never, but over the last 5 years, it just really hasn't gone to what I would call maybe a cheap valuation or an affordable valuation. Yes, we had this March dip like all stocks. You could have picked up your whole portfolio at a reduced price, okay? But typically, this stock is going to trade in that 30 to 40 PE. Currently, it's sitting right at about 40. Wouldn't necessarily call that overvalued. It's just something that you want to be aware of with a Visa. The second thing you want to be aware of with Visa, they just declared a 32-cent dividend. That's per quarter. So for the whole year, they're paying about $1.28 per share. That's only about 0.66% yield. When we get over to the financials, we'll see how much room they have left to grow that if they needed to attract shareholders, if that's something that they want to do. So let's get over to the numbers. I wanted to bring up this page. It's more of an investor presentation slide, but I think it illustrates something that's very critical here. And then we're going to get over to the stock chart. Tell you what, this one's pulling back into a zone where I might actually buy Visa here very shortly. So we've got our revenues here. We've got service revenues. We've got data processing revenues, international transaction revenues, and we've got some other revenues. And then finally, we have client incentives, which are basically money coming back out of the revenue. So all things being equal, take a look. We're up 5% on those, 6% data revenues, other revenues 5%. What's the big anomaly? International transaction revenues down 28% to 1.4 billion. So if these can come back, I got to imagine when the travel restrictions and all that stuff eventually gets lifted, we got to assume that hopefully that happens, that Visa will be well positioned to capture a lot of that growth. We ended up with we'll call that $5.7 billion of a revenue, obviously down just slightly, about 6%. And again, mainly due, or actually really exclusively done to the international transaction revenues. Now, they have other costs here. They've done a nice job actually controlling these costs and actually keeping them down. Costs actually fell about 10%. So while our revenues fell 6%, our costs fell 10%, and that's allowed operating income to be a really strong 3.8 billion. So we spent 1.843 billion to make 5.7 billion, and we end up making on our operating side $3.8 billion. Now they have some other operating expenses that gets us to the net income, and that leads us to earnings per share of $1.42. I showed you that they pay $1.28 per share in a dividend, earning $1.42. Not that bad. They probably could increase that dividend. Now, everything else looks pretty good with Visa. I won't waste your time with the balance sheet and cash flows. Quite frankly, it looks good. I think the more exciting thing is, can you buy Visa right now? Should you buy Visa right now? I've put some trend lines in here. I wanted to zoom this out. This goes back a little ways, but I wanted to capture a lot of this price action here. And we had a nice little dip here. This was back just a couple months ago. And, Visa's on a little bit of a downtrend right here. Let's zoom back in, and I want to show you this stock is pulling into what I would consider this zone in here, 190 up to, we'll call that 198, almost 200. You could potentially just bump this up to kind of round off our numbers here up to 200. Okay. This is a zone zone, and we're at 201. So you're at the top of this zone. We have all this price action and sideways action here that should act as some level of support if this stock pulls back. We see the last few times the stock has pulled back into this zone, it rallied, it pulled back here and actually gapped down, and then it rallied, and it rallied hard. Now, the other thing I see on this is we had this large gap here. Notice that price action went from this line right at 200 and gapped all the way up to 214. So we have this big gap, and we have completely filled this gap with this price trend. So that is not that bad either. I actually like that from a technical perspective. We filled this gap, and now we could go sideways with Visa, but this is a stock where if you're a long-term holder like I am, you're a buy and hold investor, this is an area where I don't mind it. Now, would I do a full position? Let's say I wanted 10 shares of a Visa. Would I do all 10 shares in one day? No, I might do one or two, wait to see what happens, because if we start piercing through the lower end of this range of 190, well, guess what? We've got all this price action down here. This was kind of the March, kind of the beginning of the pandemic down in here. I mean, this is way lower than where we're at. So you want to just be a little careful, but if this level holds, the 190 to 200 level holds, and this stock is able to turn things around, particularly in this international transaction revenue, well, I tell you what, Visa's well positioned to be a very, very good stock over the next year or 2 years. I like this one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We'll be back again soon with more. Good luck with your investments.